Hello there, welcome back to the channel. Sorry I've been away a little bit. I've been working an extremely lot over Christmas, though that has changed now since I just lost my job, which was unpleasant, but hey ho. Let's get back into the Dominion series, and in this episode we're going to look at something I've mentioned in other episodes about how the Dominion is something of a dark reflection of the Federation. I'm going to do more of a deep dive into this in a more extensive video. This one's more of just a sort of lead into that, which is the sort of thing I didn't want to include in that video because it's not necessarily canonical, but it was intended to be canonical, which for budgetary reasons and a few other things it kind of didn't make its way in. And that would be just how the Dominion was meant to be portrayed. It was actually in something of part of the storyline that the Dominion was always meant to be a sort of mirror of the Federation, just not quite exactly the same. Like, it has a lot of the same base foundations, but is a little different. Basically, the Jem'Hadar are not their own species. And although the Dominion ships are very impressive and very powerful, they're not really built by the Jem'Hadar. Or at least they're not initially built by them. I suppose the Jem'Hadar did help with building them. As likely did the Vorta, but they were designed and technically owned by the Founders. Starfleet in the Federation is technically originally a human organization, but upon the foundation of the Federation it became more of a multi-species organization. Now, it's still technically Earth's fleet, technically, but a bit like the United Nations in space, they kind of take everyone from everywhere into them, and the Dominion fleet was meant to be basically the same. The Founders' original fleet, which was the fleet that would go on to be known as the Jem'Hadar battleships and attack ships, were technically changeling vessels. They were just built for humanoids. The Jem'Hadar, the created foot soldiers of the Dominion. But that wasn't meant to be pure and simply what they were. Races such as the Dosai, who I previously did a video on, I think it was my last video before this one, and other races like the Karima and others, were all meant to be sort of omnipresent aboard these ships. A bit like how you would walk on a Starfleet vessel and you could see Bolians, Andorians, Vulcans, Tellarites, humans, Betazoids, Trill, you name it. Races both in the Federation and from without it, artificial life such as Data, traditional enemies of the Federation such as Worf, coming from a Klingon background and heritage. These were all a sort of multicultural aspect of Starfleet, and the Dominion was meant to be the same way. The only difference would be that they were not necessarily as willing to be there. More like either indoctrinated or simply forced in some way, with probably only a smaller number of people being genuinely wanting to be there, with the Vorta in charge, the Jem'Hadar as enforcers, and then some, I don't know, Dosai there to work the engineering room and things like that. But for purposes of budget out of universe, this idea was scrapped in favour of just keeping it a bit more uniform. It made the makeup process and the basically delivery process of the show a lot easier to have just Jem'Hadar and Vorta seen on the ships, rather than having all these other different aliens be part of the crew. But that was originally meant to be the concept of the Dominion ships. They were basically like those of the Federation, like Starfleet, with different aliens on board, serving different functions within the vessel. As engineer, as soldier, i.e. the Jem'Hadar, as medical officer, as diplomatic officer, likely the Vorta, things like that. But basically, they were meant to be a multicultural kind of microcosm, similar to the Federation, but not exactly the same. This is one way I mean that the Dominion is meant to be a dark reflection of the Federation. As I said, I didn't want to explore this too much in the video I've got upcoming, which is going to be a bit more reasoned out, because this is basically non-canon, because that's not what the Dominion ultimately did and was shown to do on the show, and therefore that makes this no longer canon. Although I don't doubt that if they needed a Karima aboard their ship for whatever reason, the Vorta would just go, get aboard the ship now or else, and I'm sure they would just comply. But we never saw it. And unfortunately, it was something that was lost as a result a little bit in translation with the Dominion, as often takes the stage in any science fiction setting. Once you sort of become too familiar with the enemy, they become kind of easy to knock down. the Jem'Hadar became less and less threatening as Starfleet adapted more and more to their technology and their abilities. I think actually one of Starfleet's strengths is that multicultural nature, and it was meant to show that the Dominion was pulling from the same sort of strength, the same sort of foundations. You never really would have known who you were fighting when you were fighting the Dominion. The same way it was, the Dominion never know, is it an Andorian, is it a Vulcan, is it a Tellarite, is it a human? They all fight and think differently like many alien species would do. So if you've got a Bolian in charge of a ship, who are generally a more laid-back people, you might not have a very aggressive fighter. If it's a Vulcan, they might be more reasoned and logical and try to avoid violence. An Andorian will be more headstrong and a little more, perhaps more impulsive. A human might be a little bit more arrogant and belligerent when dealing with an alien species. These are all different ways different species interact with other races. It will also depend on who they're interacting with. That was again meant to be mirrored in the Dominion versus the Federation, and show how they are both similar and different at the same time. Basically the same concept, just executed very, very differently. And I know there's an obvious comparison to be made here with, say, the Terran Empire that did a similar thing, but the Terran Empire has never really gone head-to-head with the Prime Universe Federation outside of beta canon such as Star Trek Online. So there we have it. As I said, just a short video because I didn't want to cover this in the bigger, more expansive video I'm going to do on this subject as I do the series overall and sort of break down all the different assets of the Dominion, and then do one video which will kind of compile it all together, which is basically the plan. But because this is technically non-canon, I just wanted to give it a little video and let you all guys think. What do you think? Do you think it would have been a good thing? I personally would have liked to have seen the Dominion ships flooded with different species working on them collectively to undermine and defeat the Federation, basically take its strength and turn it against them. I think that was a very good idea. I'm sad that they weren't able to do it for one reason or another. Would you like to have seen it on screen? Is it something that you think the Dominion could have benefited from, or was the good old Jem'Hadar hit it hard, hit it fast, and hope it dies before you do approach the best one for the Dominion? Or something a little more nuanced, maybe would have made it a little bit more interesting. Let me know in the comments below. And that's the end of this video. I'd just like to say a thank you to everyone for watching that video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoy making these. If you did enjoy it, please consider giving a like, share, and a subscribe, and maybe checking out the other videos on the screen right now. And in the description box below, there are links to my other social media accounts.